After what legitimately feels like 10,000 hours in a torture chamber watching Counter-Strike day in and day out, we have finally wrapped up the final group stage games of ESL Pro League Season 19. The playoffs are set, the Thunderdome is open and ready, we have decided the final 8 teams heading further into the competition, and of course consequently, sent our final 8 teams packing, ready for a vacation. The brackets are set, and we need only bide our time until Tuesday when the fireworks can begin. So if you missed out the action this week, you're in the right place, because today we're going to be going over all of the Group C and Group D results so that you know what you're going into for the playoffs ahead of time. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you guys take a second, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It helps out immensely in the YouTube algorithm. The majority of you who watch these videos are not subscribed, so do it because it costs you nothing. It helps me out immensely. While you're down there, consider becoming a channel member. For $5 a month, you can support me directly in what we do here, gain access to exclusive emblems, emotes, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as more features coming soon. Lastly, consider checking me out on Twitch. I stream Sunday through Friday, 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come hang out tonight after you watch this video. I'll be playing Fallout 76 with my brother. We'll be talking about the ESL Pro League happenings as we get ready for the week ahead of us. And of course, thank you guys for watching. My name is LionHeartZ, and let's get started with the recap. Just like last week, let's start off by talking about the teams in both of our groups. In Group C, we had Bad News Kangaroos, ENCE, Forze, Furia Esports, GamerLegion, Monte, Mouz, and Team Liquid. And in Group D, we had Big, Boss, Complexity, FlyQuest, Heroic, NAVI, Ninjas in Pajamas, and Pera Esports. Focusing in on Group C, our advancing teams were Mouz, Team Liquid, GamerLegion, and Monte. Starting off with the winner of the group, Mouz, they advance in 3-0. They dominate all of their series, winning every single best of 3 in 2 games. They beat Bad News Kangaroos in the opener. They then went on to stomp out GamerLegion, and they won the upper bracket final in Group C by taking down Liquid, also in 2-0 fashion, which means they have a comfy quarterfinal spot in the playoffs, that they will cover more in a little bit. As for how they look so far, once again, Mouz are on an incredible run of form right now since the major. They've been looking really good. Every single time I watch this team play, they are so consistent. They play as such a great unit, and they just don't mess around. They don't play with their food. When it comes to dealing with worse teams, I am never worried about Mouz giving up an upset. They are just far too consistent, far too strategically sound, and on top of that, the skill level of their star players is just a cut above until you get to the very tippy top of the top 10. Obviously, it's only across 6 maps, but every single player on Mouz Sports is averaging above a 1.2 rating. Jimfat is leading the way, looking just like a bona fide star player. Brolin continues to excel in this team, finally getting to flourish and broaden his horizons. He's looking so good as the second man in behind Jimfat. And then you got Xerxian and Torzi bringing up the rear, and Shui, who continues to show himself to be a capable in-game leader and one of the best in the world right now. Look no further than the upper bracket final against Team Liquid to see a team supremely in control of the pace the entire time. Even though Liquid took them to a 13-11 scoreline on Nuke, the back-breaking plays from this Mouz team just seem to crush Liquid's spirit. Shuhei gets that incredible ninja defuse late in the game that just breaks any momentum Liquid were starting to build, and takes advantage of Liquid just having a sloppy moment where they have full control. It's a 4v2. The round is absolutely won. They get the plant on the lower bomb site, and then Liquid goes hunting for exits. They don't do their due diligence and have someone stay by the bomb till the very end, and Shuhei just sneaks out single door, gets the freest ninja defuse of his life, and it's backbreaking, heartbreaking for the Liquid side to stomach that. Again, I can't emphasize this enough, this team is just so solid, and because of that solid play that they've been showing lately, they're rewarded with an immediate spot in the quarterfinals. They get several days of rest, and now they only have to focus on trying just to make the semis and then the finals of a major tournament. It's looking really good for Mouz to make a run to the finals, and they're in a really good spot to actually win this entire tournament, which would be huge. This is a team that's been working its way up the leaderboards for a while now, and they're just looking for that big breakthrough moment, and considering the bracket for the playoffs, something we'll talk about more later, this might be their time to do it. Right behind Mouz, and also definitely in the hunt for a big result here, is Team Liquid. And Team Liquid, while certainly not as dominant as Mouz through this bracket, they still looked really good. They secured what they needed to do, they advanced into the playoffs, and now they can take some time, retool, and get ready for their next opponents. They open up with a best of 3 against Furia. They dropped the first map on Inferno. Furia definitely had some up and down moments in this tournament, as we'll talk about later, but they comfortably take the next 2, the reverse sweep, 13-7, 13-9, and again, Twists looking fantastic. Cadian definitely having his moments on the op, and Naf definitely being that solid anchor this team needs. My big question mark with Liquid remains, what is the upper limit of the star power of this team? Because when I compare Liquid to other top teams, I do think they fall behind in the fragging department. Twist has never been in the position of being the #1 best player on a team. He's always had someone else right beside him, like a Liege or Rops. So he's never really been in that role where he needs to be the #1 guy. And past him, I think the fragging really starts to fall off. Naf is solid, but he's not a star player. He's not going to stuff the stat sheet. And then you need someone like Yakindar or Skulls to really step up, because Cadian, while a great opper, is not going to be better than a superstar opper like, say, a Wonderful or Munisi. And I think the stats reflect this disparity for Liquid. When you look at their stats thus far in the tournament, yes, Twist, he's playing great. Naf is having a great tournament, and then it's an immediate drop-off in quality. Cadian isn't going to have the best stats in the world because he's the in-game leader, but he also has great impact. Cadian has huge rounds individually that definitely make up for his lack of overall numbers. It's Yakindar and Skulls. Are these two going to be enough to step up and fill up the void? Because again, compare them to Mouz. Mouz are 4 very good players with an incredible in-game leader. They don't even have a top 5 individual player. It's an incredibly even amount of fragging spread throughout the lineup. That makes for great versatility and a hard team to beat in a best of 3. As much as Liquid continue to look good in spurts since this lineup has formed, I can't help but feel they're one lineup change away, and that lineup change has to be for some actual star power next to Twists. Can they do damage in this playoff format? I absolutely think they could, but I really think it has to come from an overperformance somewhere else in the team. It's not going to be enough to just have Twist be as good as he has been, if Liquid want a win out of this. Next up to qualify in Group C is GamerLegion, who continue to impress me as sort of this fringe top 20 team. Every time I watch them play, I'm really impressed by how solid and fundamental this team plays Counter-Strike. And I think all that has to do with Snax definitely stepping up and becoming a great in-game leader. I think we're looking at the point where we need to start respecting Snax's ability here as a potential top 10 caliber in-game leader. He just needs an opportunity with a better team or a better organization. But the way he's taken these rosters with Acor and Kios previously, and now you add in Slend and Andu, and he's just gotten good, solid results out of them. I mean, they open up here, they beat ENCE, they lose to Mouz, no big deal. They do what they need to against Forze and then beat ENCE again to qualify. They're doing the job against similarly qualified teams and then losing the battle of firepower once you get to the top 10 or better teams. And when you look at what Snax has to work with, I think that's actually a damn solid set of results. They make the playoffs here. That's great. There are teams with better talent, better star potential, who did not qualify. So I think this team's incredibly solid. I don't expect them to do anything in the playoffs, but just making it there I think is proof that Snax has legitimate chops as an IGL, and we need to start talking about that more. And the last to qualify out of Group C, coming through the lower bracket, is Monte, a team admittedly that I have not seen play very much at all prior to this tournament. They just weren't on my radar, so really my only experience with them are the matches they've played here at Pro League. And honestly, it's not a bad showing. Demka and Waro actually really impressed me as far as fragging power goes for a team of this level. I mean, when you look at their match results, losing to Liquid and ENCE, losing to Liquid I can understand just based on where this team is placed in the world. ENCE, I don't know how forgivable that is because I think ENCE are really vulnerable, but I mean they did the work against other comparable teams. They took out Forza twice, and Waro and Demka, they looked great in this must-win series against Furia. They looked way better and more complete than Furia did, which is saying something because Furia should be a team that we're talking about as like a dark horse to be contending in these tournaments with names like Fallen and K-Serato. But instead, they bow out to this team of European players that most people probably didn't know before Pro League. Now, unfortunately, going forward, does this team have a shot in hell in the playoffs? Probably not. But again, just qualifying, making it to the playoffs is a big deal if you're one of these tier 2 teams. It gets you noticed, it gets you put on the map. These players could be picked up for other rosters now. So congrats to Monte for making it. They looked way better than I expected. And now, a moment of silence for the Group C participants who will not be advancing to Tuesday's festivities, who will instead be advancing only to the airport to lick their wounds and look for the next tournament on the calendar. First up, we have Bad News Kangaroos, who are a team that didn't do anything. Nothing of note in this tournament. And while that may sound harsh, it's unfortunately the reality of Counter-Strike. This is a borderline tier 3 team of Australian players with no notable star power whatsoever. They were the worst rated team at this tournament. They had a team KD ratio of 0.67 over 7 maps played. Frankly, it says a lot more about ENCE than it does about Bad News Kangaroos that they dropped a map to them. And just a brief tangent, this is kind of the problem with these tournaments sometimes, is when you have Tier 2 versus Tier 1 competition, outside of the very rare upset, it's hard to care about the Tier 2 competition whatsoever, because the gulf between a team like Bad News Kangaroos and a team like FaZe is as wide as the gap between me and the Bad News Kangaroos. I acknowledge that these players are good enough to be professionals in this game, therefore they are the top 1%. But the gap between the 1% and the 0.01% is almost insurmountable. So these teams are just not going to do damage in a serious tournament. That's why when you care about these teams, you have to watch them in the Tier 2 playing against other Tier 2s, because that's where you can actually get a gauge of how good they are. They're never going to do anything against Tier 1 competition, because that's just the reality of the skill difference in a game like Counter-Strike. And unfortunately, much of the same can be said for Forze. I mean, this is literally a mixed team with some Polish and some European players. Smooya is here, and they literally have a player named Nickelback. Literally a player named Nickelback. And listen, man, this is the only photograph I'm looking at as far as your results go for this tournament. Now, as for ENCE, this is a team that continues to vex me, because I want to believe that Glaive is not done winning tournaments in Counter-Strike. His book is by no means closed. If Kerrigan continued to be a valuable IGL this late into his 30s, there's no reason that Glaive can't be either, in my opinion. It's just very clear this ENCE team is not the roster to do it. This team just doesn't have any star power. It doesn't have enough to do anything significant on the world stage, and frankly, I think Glaive is wasting his time. There is another team out there that would fit Glaive much better. I don't know where that is, but he needs to be looking, because ENCE is just not going to do it. They're never going to do it. This team is just poor on all levels. And lastly, we have Furia, who are going home as well. And normally this is where I'd do something funny, maybe make fun of Fallen for being old. But I'm going to go easy on Furia this time because they recently made a change. They finally benched Art, so they're no longer playing 2 IGLs. But the problem is they didn't have a time to sign a proper 5th. They had Kai, who came in as a stand-in, so they're essentially playing without a proper 5th player, so you can't expect anything good to come out of that. Despite that, Serato continues to look like a top 10 player in the world, so once Furia take the leap, sign some legit Brazilian talent, like maybe a guy named Big Azera from Pain Gaming, just saying, just throwing it out there, then I think we would have a legitimate top 10 Brazilian team for the first time in a while, and one that could do damage in big tournaments. I really do believe that. I think everything else behind this team is fine. Yuri and Cello, they're good enough. Fallen, he's up and down, but he's still a good enough operator to get by, and Serato is cash money. Just give this man some star level support. Moving on to Group D, our advancing teams were Complexity, NAVI, Big, and FlyQuest. Starting off with our group winners, we have Complexity. Now listen, if you're a veteran of this channel, you may be expecting me to play the national anthem, bass boosted, with eagles screeching in the background as guns are firing everywhere, explosions, America, freedom. And you'd be goddamn right, because America has showed up to Pro League, baby! How's it feel? Navi! What happened? You're the major winners! How are you gonna lose to the bald Wonder Elige? What happened? Excuse me. In all seriousness, Complexity I think are looking really good to open this tournament. A bit inconsistent, but that's what I've come to expect from this team. Their very style and roster construction just kind of necessitates that they're not going to win a whole lot of Series 2-0. They're going to make you sweat it out. They're going to drop maps and sometimes drop series early on, and you're just going to have to live with that if you're a fan of this team like I am, as much as it sometimes raises my blood pressure. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. They had the second round matchup against Heroic. They lose in tragic fashion on Nuke to open it up, and I was formulating diamonds in my sphincter afterwards because Heroic are a damn solid team, and I was worried we were gonna drop down to the lower bracket, things were getting scrappy, and then it's a nightmare from there on. But then the reverse sweep against Heroic, taking Vertigo and Anubis to advance to the finals matchup against Navi, the major winners, riding high. They lose on Ancient. Ancient's not a very good map for Complexity, so I kind of give that one away. And then they dominate Anubis, and they absolutely slap Navi around on Nuke. It was a 7-5 half on Nuke. And then Complexity open up their CT side and win every goddamn round except for one on their CT side to shut out NAVI and advance to the quarterfinals. I can't explain to you how big it is for Complexity to go straight to the quarterfinals. For one, we'll talk about the brackets at the end of this video. They dodge a group of death with FaZe and Vitality, and straight up, if they lose to NAVI, Complexity are out of this tournament because they're not going to beat both FaZe and Vitality unless things go absolutely crazy, which means that Complexity are in a serious position to make a finals appearance and potentially win this tournament. The questions remain: can Elige get enough supporting fragging power out of Grims and Halzerk? That is always the question mark with this team. Will Grim and Halzerk show up and support Elige? Because Elige is going to do it. Elige has proven that he's not going to fall off. He's going to be your #1 guy. But can they hold together as a team when the other players start getting targeted? And so far, Grim is having a bounce back tournament. He looked great in that NAVI series. He's looked great elsewhere, and he needs to keep it up. I'm really excited about Complexity, and I'm so glad they made it through. Now, as for NAVI, losing to Complexity aside, they have proven that this core is not to be fucked with. A lot of people were claiming that that run at the major, it's a fluke. They didn't have to beat the best teams in the world. They got a free ride to the finals. Whatever. I don't care. Right now, the individuals are still playing really well. Bit, Emma, Wonderful, and JL. This is a world-class core with a world-class in-game leader. And despite the fact they're in an absolute nightmare group, they have a chance against Vitality. They have a chance against FaZe. It's not unreasonable for them to beat those teams. So I wouldn't count them out. They're qualified through. They have a shot. Do not just count NAVI out because of how they did against Complexity. This is a team that can still do it and win this tournament. And listen, all love to our next two teams who also qualified, but big FlyQuest, these are not teams that are in the running to win this tournament unless things go really wacky in the playoffs. And listen, that could happen, but odds are it won't. So talking about Big specifically has always been an organization I've been very interested in because I think God B is one of the better minds Counter-Strike has ever produced, and since he's retired as an in-game leader and moved over to the coaching role, I've always been curious to see what he can do with these all-German lineups. And the reality is Tabson in the past has been an incredible player, a borderline top 10 player, but he's always needed to branch out to international lineups. There just doesn't seem to be enough talent in the German community to produce a top 10 team outside of those early God B lineups that did some damage several years ago. So they qualify, and they're looking alright. Crimbo's looked good. Tabson's been just kind of okay to middling. But again, this team just isn't going to do it against the best teams in the world. They're not going to do that. So it's hard for me to get excited about them. And that dichotomy to me I think is very present when you look at a team like FlyQuest. This is an Australian team that frankly is exciting to watch when they play teams of similar talent. In the NIP series today on Sunday, they were electric. They were shouting. They were making plays. They were just so bold and taking map control against NIP. It made NIP just look like they really couldn't compete at all. And that was reflected in 13-7 on Ancient and a 13-6 on Vertigo. But you look at their first match against NAVI, again, NAVI a top 10 team in the world, they just couldn't keep up at all. They just don't have enough when you face this top caliber talent. When you put them against teams that are appropriately their level, they're fun to watch. That's why it can suck to see these tier 2 teams wrapped up in a tier 1 competition, because they should have a place to shine, and they're just not going to do it in a field like this. As for our final teams that were eliminated from Group D, I have really nothing to say about Boss and Pera. These are no-name teams. They didn't do anything. There was no reason for me to really pay attention to them unless they were playing better teams. Sorry, that's just how it is. As for Heroic, I think this is going to be a tournament Heroic are going to look back and feel pretty bad about because I think they easily could have qualified. It just came down to some bad luck, I think, in the final maps. I think compared to what we saw for them at the Major, this was just not the same team in terms of just the quality of play. And really, I look at Kixon, who goes out with a .89 rating. He's the worst player on the team. He just feels like dead weight to me. I feel like Heroic are just waiting for like one more piece. This is the type of team where I think they could cycle around, maybe consider picking up Glaive as their new in-game leader, looking for one more Danish star player, and then we can really talk about them being the best team in Denmark. They're not that far off. The core of NARTZ, Tessus, Nikodas is good enough to be contesting. They just need a few more pieces around them to really make that leap. I really think if we run this over, they were to play this tournament again, do I expect them to lose to Big and Ninjas in Pajamas like 9 times out of 10? I would say no. Just unfortunately, this was one of those moments where they faltered when they needed to against, I would say, worse competition, and they have to go out because of it. And lastly, we have Ninjas in Pajamas, who were playing without Rez, who was their best player, as I believe he had an illness coming into this tournament and just wasn't able to make it. So you're playing down a player in the first place, or you're having to play with a stand-in, which is never ideal, and then on top of that, he's your best player. So it's no surprise they went out, but despite that, they had some good showings in some series. Rinko looked really good on the op, which is something that NIP has been lacking in a bunch of different iterations, so I think if they get Rez back and healthy, I'm really curious to see how this lineup does going forward. And with that, we have wrapped up the group stage. 2 weeks of competition are done, we have seeded the playoffs, and we are ready to go straight into the action on Tuesday with the finale of ESL Pro League Season 19. As we move into this final stretch, you guys can expect daily recaps of all the playoff action here on the channel. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can stay informed on all the action as it plays out. Also, tune in tomorrow, we'll be doing our playoff predictions, so get ready for that so you can check out the bracket and see what I'm thinking as far as who's going to win and who's going to lose going into the first day of play. Other than that, let me know how you guys' brackets are doing in the comments down below. Did the teams you want to qualify make it? I'll be down there responding to everything I can. Shout out to Jesse, Justin, and Furley for being my channel members. You guys help keep the lights on. I appreciate you immensely. Other than that, my name is LionHeartZ. I am tired. I'm ready to go to bed, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with another video. You guys have a great day. Peace.